The 14th Amendment, passed by Congress June 13th, 1866, ratified July 9th, 1868. And we'll get into why there's that gap in a minute. And this is going to be multiple slides, so bear with us, folks. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So we're going to start with why it took the time to be ratified. Because this one passed Congress after the war was over. And in order to regain representation in Congress, the states of the Confederacy had to ratify this amendment. And they did not want to. Which is why it was so easy to pass it relative to getting it ratified, because the states of the Confederacy weren't involved in passing it. They needed to ratify it, and they did not want to, because the practical purpose of this was, the intention of this was declaring black men, let's be fair, citizens.
And this was a callback to, I'm guessing, the Dred Scott case.
Yes. This made black people in the United States worthy of all protections accorded to white people, legally. In practice, I don't think we're there yet. But legally, black people and white people were, by purposes of the 14th Amendment, equal. And that was...
And this also starts the thing that they want to overturn now, is where if you're born here, you're a citizen.
Yes. If you are born in the United States, you're a citizen. You know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, I'm gonna overturn that by executive act. You can't. The only way to undo birthright citizenship in the United States is by amending or repealing the 14th Amendment. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people who would love to do just that. They do not like this amendment.
Yeah, because the problem with that is, if you can do that for, say, babies born crossing the border, what's the deal for doing that to your political opponents?
Yeah. I don't like making slippery slope arguments. But repealing any part of the 14th Amendment is inherently a slippery slope. It is intended to end protections for people, to make it easier to make changes, to keep control. And they don't like the birthright citizenship clause, but they don't like any of this amendment. They want to take away rights from people they don't like.
Yeah, I think one of the courts came after this was that Chinese guy case, where they didn't want him in the country, but he was born here.
Yeah.
This was the case. I forget what exactly called. It was like, I forget what the case was called. I used to know it. You know what I mean, right? That one case.
Yeah, United States v. Wong Kim Ark.
Yeah. It's like, I was born here. Like, you can come in, but
Wong Kim Ark was born in the United States and therefore was legally a citizen. He was prevented from coming back into the United States under the Chinese Exclusion Act. And he was like, excuse you, I was born here. A lot of other countries don't do birthright citizenship. The United States does, and it is a result of slavery. because it is phrased this way for the express purpose of making all black people in the United States citizens.
Because like we mentioned a few slides ago, I forget which one it was, the Taney case, where like you have
Yeah.
rights here. You're a black guy. You have no rights here.
Yeah. I mention Taney a lot because it's relevant. But this is a direct superseding of Dred Scott. The Dred Scott case could not be found the same way once the 14th Amendment was passed, which, Taney didn't live to see. Boy, it would have pissed him off. Because he was born in the United States, therefore he was a citizen, therefore he was entitled to equal protection under the law. And since the 14th Amendment has been passed, most Supreme Court litigation has involved the 14th Amendment in some way. Because the second part, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, means, for the first time, the Constitution applies to the states.
Oh yeah, before we talked about that in the First Amendment, that like the Bill of Rights only applied to federal people.
Yeah, Bill of Rights only applied on a federal level. There could be an official state religion in your state. Somebody could decide to make all of Massachusetts Episcopalian. They could decide to make all of Georgia Baptist. They could decide to make all of Hawaii Buddhist. These would all have been legally, not the Hawaii one because Hawaii wasn't a state yet, but you know what I mean. All of that would have been doable before the 14th Amendment. Once the 14th Amendment passes, a lot of state laws are getting struck down because they violate some part of the Constitution.
Yeah, because we talked about the 11th Amendment. I think this is the start of the states losing some power.
Yeah, the states lose a fair amount of power under the 14th Amendment, which I would argue goes to the individual, not the federal government. Because it's stuff that the federal government was already prohibited from doing. A sampling of cases from the Equal Protection Clause are things like Brown versus Board of Education, Loving v. Virginia, sadly Bush v. Gore, but we're not getting into that. Reed versus Reed held that women had to be protected under the law as being equal to men. There was an Idaho law that said that men had to be preferred over women in administrating estates, and appointed the husband over the wife. And the wife sued on the grounds that was some hot garbage. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was involved in that one.
Yeah, cough drop.
Hernandez v. Texas, which found that Mexican Americans were systematically excluded from juries in Texas. And Texas argued that because Mexicans were white, they didn't qualify for Equal Protection Clause.
Okay.
The Supreme Court disagreed with that, which is why you get questions about whether you're of Hispanic origin on census forms. Now, the Supreme Court has found the wrong way sometimes. Plessy v. Ferguson was a 14th Amendment case. That was wrong. Um,
So I remember this, but yeah, like at least this part right here is the one they've been talking about, like repelling or want to get rid of.
yeah. 14th Amendment is one of the ones that a lot of, it's hard to call them conservatives, but whatever, talk about wanting to get rid of, partially because of the naturalization, the birthright citizenship. Partially because they want states to be able to make whatever the hell laws they want. Partially,
if the states agree with them,
right? If the states agree with them, partially because they want to get rid of equal protection, because equal protection more and more favors minority groups, and they don't like that.
I've heard before. It's the an immigrant can come over here, have a baby, and that baby has all the rights. That baby has all the rights.
Yeah, the so-called anchor baby idea. Yeah. Other important cases found under the substantive due process, which is the you can't deprive people of life, liberty, or property without due process. Griswold v. Connecticut, the lamented Roe v. Wade, Oberfell v. Hodges. These are some very important cases. Because it really, really matters that everybody be protected from the government. This is going back to our old theme of anti-tyranny. You cannot, as a state, take away life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And taking away my right to marry who I want to is taking away my liberty.
Via different color or different same sex.
I mean, yeah, I would argue that the marriage penalty for disability is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Of course, people on disability can't afford to sue about it, and I wouldn't try with this court anyway. But I would argue that I'm having my liberty and property denied by not letting me get married without losing my benefits. So a lot of case law involves and we haven't even finished with the 14th Amendment yet. And we've still got a ton of really important case law to how the United States looks today, tied up on just this one slide. The First and 14th Amendments are two of the most active amendments as far as Supreme Court cases.
Yeah. So looking ahead, the next one, I think the next one fixes the 3/5.
Yes. This part is less frequently cited. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed, which, again, I don't. Yeah. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for President and Vice President of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state, being 21 years of age, and that's two clauses that have been altered, and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged except for participation in rebellion or other crime. We'll get back to that. The basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. So this is very, very strictly limiting things to male citizens. The word male is in here repeatedly. And that is because women's suffrage was starting to be an issue. And if they didn't put the word male in, with the statement in the previous slide that anyone born in the United States was a citizen, that was an obvious, therefore women are citizens. Because, friends, therefore women are citizens.
Can't have that.
Yeah. And so this slide is intended to allow for black men to vote while not allowing white women to vote.
Yeah. Well, they still have more room to go for officially do that, but it was laying the groundwork for it.
Well, I mean, it's very, very clear that they can't deny the vote to male inhabitants of the state. But if you want to deny it to female inhabitants of the state, there's nothing in this amendment that says you can't. We'll get to that.
But like I said, mainly this first part of it is overturning the 3/5 compromise.
Yeah, the whole number of persons. Full stop. Except for Indians not taxed, which is its own conversation that I am not qualified to have. No more 3/5. Each person who counts as a whole person.
So I guess after this point, the Southern state representation went up a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. And there was a lot of voter suppression to make the representation go up without making the black people have a say. So that it increased the power of the white Southern leading class. And a lot of the fight in the 60s would be the attempt to keep the power that they had stolen from the black population of the state, which was explicitly given to the black population of the state in the 14th Amendment. Those Confederate statues that people don't want taken down were put up as part of voter suppression to remind the black people and the white people, you know, we literally fought a war to keep this power. What do you think we'll do to you? You need to know your place. These are our heroes. Not, you know, there's no statues of Grant in the South.
Yeah, that's funny. It's like it's funny. They're like, when people complain about tearing down statues destroys history. Like, no one was complaining about when we tore down the statue of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. No one's like, that's not history. Yeah. That's not a history thing. No, tear it down. No, we tore down.
Well, and I have to tell you, I'm not an expert on metallurgy, but I know enough to know that those are really cheap statues, and they're going to start coming down on their own not too much further. I'm surprised most of them are still standing. The metal on those is really bad.
And no one cared when we tore down a statue of George III during the American Revolution, you know, to make bullets, you know, like no one complained, like, oh my God, that's a history statue, don't tear it down.
Yeah. You know, what's the first thing that we do when we take over a city in time of war? We tear down the statues. That's what we do. You lose the war, your statues come down. That is tradition. And what happened instead was these statues got put up in case people, black people in the South started thinking that they might have 14th Amendment rights.
I didn't really think about that until recently, that these statues, the people brought up to me that these statues are people, literally traitors.
Yeah. You notice that it is considered perfectly acceptable to take away people's right to vote in case of rebellion. If you participate in a rebellion, it is legally acceptable to take away your right to vote. And in fact, it was something that was practically expected, and it didn't end up happening. And the history of the United States would have been very, very different if it had.
We'll get into more of that in the next section.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying, the pardons that got issued let people think they could get away with rebellion. And we are recording this on January 7th. So it's kind of hard not to draw parallels at this moment.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, it's 4 years past the famous January 6th, but 4 years and a day past the famous January 6th. So, yeah.
So are you the loser of this election isn't going around saying storm to the Capitol? You're saying?
That's what I'm saying. A friend of mine posted something on Facebook yesterday about how she's not storming the Capitol because she's so demure and mindful. I'm like, yeah, also we'd have to travel, and I have bad knees. But the fact is it is my opinion that we should be invoking that participation in rebellion clause and removing the vote from people who are convicted of that particular crime. And those people are not guilty of trespassing, they're guilty of treason. They were trying to overthrow a legal election because they didn't like the results. That is treason, friends. That is rebellion, and they should lose their right to vote. Instead, a lot of them want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. I don't think they think about this section of it. I think they're mostly angry about the last slide. But since most of them haven't read their Constitution, who even knows?
And maybe the next slide too.
Yeah. Well, someone once asked Jordan Klepper if he'd read the Constitution, and he said, "Yeah, it's not very long." And they were like, "Wait, really?" He's like, "No, it's a fairly short document." No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of vice president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. And they did.
Yeah, because I think this was because I remember correctly, some former Southerners were coming back like, "Hey, we're back, guys."
Yeah.
Back in the Senate, back in the House, just like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
And they're like, no.
Yeah. It was intended to keep former Confederates out of the government. And it should have. And there are a lot of people serving in positions of trust and authority in the government today who should be kicked out for participation in a rebellion. And if we had done that in the last 4 years, if we had paid attention to the 14th Amendment, we could be in a very different place right now. Because there are 2 Supreme Court justices who, at the very least, are married to people who called for insurrection and didn't speak out against them. There are people in Congress today who gave a tour of the Capitol to people who later invaded it. And that is aid and comfort. Sure, they ran away when the building was invaded, but they still bear some of the responsibility for what happened. There are people who gave speeches encouraging what happened that day, one of whom is about to once more take the highest office in this land. These people are traitors. They should not have the right to vote, and they should not be allowed to hold office in this country. They gave oaths to support the Constitution, and they engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. They want to pretend that they didn't. They are claiming that they were trying to overturn an illegitimate election. But they weren't. They were mad because a majority of people liked the other guy better. And I'm mad because a majority of people who voted liked the other guy better in this election and in the one 8 years ago.
But we didn't call for the end of the country when we lost.
Yeah. I was mad in 84. I was mad in 88. I was mad in 2000. I was mad in 2004. I was mad in 2016. I'm mad now. I have never stormed the Capitol. I have cried. I have raged. I have written angry articles. I have written to my asserted elected representatives. But I have always worked within the system.
Yeah. We at least as I don't know. At least as far as I'm concerned, at least as me, I don't know. But I'm guessing. I'm assuming you too. We haven't declared fraud. Not paying attention to this. Not legal president. Whatever. We listen to him.
Like I believe
we might not want to listen to him, but we do because he's legally the president.
Yeah, I believe that Bush v. Gore was a flawed ruling, and I can argue the constitutional case for that. But it was found the way it was, and I'm surly about it, and I've been surly about it for, a quarter century now.
25 years.
But
that was my first election, presidential election.
Technically, it was mine too because California lost my absentee ballot application, so I didn't get to vote in '96. Because I was living in Washington, but still registered in California.
But you're legally 18 at the time.
But I was legally, I was well 18 at the time.
I was 16 at the time of it was Clinton and Dole. I think it was Dole. Yeah, Dole.
Yeah. I was just shy of my 20th birthday by a month for the 96 election. And couldn't vote and was very upset.
I was just shy of my 17th birthday, that election.
So the thing is nobody says you don't get to be angry when the person you voted for doesn't win. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be upset. You're even allowed to feel that there was a systemic issue. If, for example, you live in a place that's got some gerrymandering issues, you are absolutely allowed to believe that gerrymandering contributed to the way an election went, because it probably did. You are allowed to feel that there is some kind of voter suppression in your area, because there might be.
But you're not trying to overthrow the government because of it.
Yeah. What you need to do is get enough people together to do something about it. Even the Supreme Court, even the current Supreme Court, has found certain districting unconstitutional because of how blatantly gerrymandered it is.
Again, I brought this up it happened right after the election when it started, but we literally voted not to end gerrymandering in our state.
Yeah, well, fortunately, my state is considered a shining beacon for how not to gerrymander.
Gotta love Ohio sometimes.
Yeah. Ohio, you fail us so often. What's wrong? How can I help?
I don't know. Get rid of that museum that's right near on our border. Maybe first of all.
Yeah, well,
but that's a Kentucky thing, technically.
Did you know that there is a Confederate memorial in Washington State down near Portland?
No.
I've been stuck in traffic near it a few times. You can see it from the freeway.
Yes, I think I understand. I understand. No, I don't understand it still, but at least southern states that they are from them. Why the hell are northern states Confederate sympathizers? I don't understand that.
Racism?
Well, that's probably the main reason, but yeah, Ohio.
That's the short answer. No,
yeah, Ohio. Union State. Let's support the Confederacy. Like what?
There are some people who have been convinced by the lost cause mythology and believe it's a states' rights issue and blah, 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 because they were educated badly. But for most people who are Confederate sympathizers in the North, it's racism. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm a Confederate sympathizer and I'm not a racist, and maybe do a little self-reflection, because either yes, you are, or maybe don't sympathize with the Confederacy. Go thou and watch Checkmate Lincolnites and learn about how much the Confederacy was about racism.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, a lot of the 14th Amendment wouldn't have been necessary if there hadn't been the racist black people aren't citizens.
I have to admit this now. When I was younger, in my younger days, I would say a sympathizer, but we used to play Civil War a lot, and me and my friends were the Lees and the Jacksons back in my younger days, in my preteen days. So I used to be a bad person.
I mean, you and I aren't far removed from the days when Dukes of Hazzard was on the air. Yeah. So, their car, the General Lee, with the Confederate flag painted on it. Like, we could have a long conversation about portrayals of the Civil War in the United States. And I'd be perfectly willing to, because I have a lot to say on that subject.
Yeah, I saw this old cartoon where they had Tweety as this Confederate, the good guy, and Sylvester with the Union being the bad
Yeah.
guy.
Though there is one where Yosemite Sam is the Confederate and Bugs is a Yankee. I like that one better.
Yeah.
So, there's an argument that
we've all had our days that were like, but some of us grew up.
Yeah, the thing is there's no shame in having held stupid beliefs. Welcome to being human. The shame is when you don't learn from them. And we as a nation have not learned from the reason we have a 14th Amendment in the first place. We let a bunch of Confederates hold office, even though they had been in active rebellion against the United States. And if we hadn't done that, that would have changed a whole bunch of things going forward.
Yeah, at the end it says Congress by 2/3 of both houses, Senate, and can like let them come back in. Obviously, I guess they did.
Yeah, they did.
That's a super majority too, not just a simple 50% thing. This was like a 66, 67 for the Senate, or not 67 at the time, but it was less, but still super majority.
At the urging of Ulysses S. Grant, there was an Amnesty Act passed in 1872, which removed the disqualification from all but the most senior Confederates. In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, another law was passed that broadened it. They posthumously lifted the disqualification from Robert E. Lee in 1975 and Jefferson Davis in 1978.
But they had been dead at that point.
Oh, they were well dead, but that's, yeah. Once it was actually used when someone who was a socialist was trying to get into the government. And yeah, pretty much everyone who's actually in Congress remained in Congress. An appeals court ruled that it only applied to people who committed constitutionally wrongful acts before 1872. Which is ludicrous. There is a guy out in New Mexico who was banned as the leader of a group that was part of the insurrection. But, yeah, pretty much everyone who was part of that rebellion was allowed back in Congress. We're moving on because it's too depressing.
All right.
The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of resurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. So, Union veterans got pensions. Congress didn't have to pay a dime for Confederate pensions. And all of those slaves that were freed, they didn't have to pay a dime to the slave owners for. Those are illegal debts.
Yeah, Yeah, I think in some of the northern states before it ended, in the northern states they tried to like do what's it called, pay the free slave like
Yeah, yeah. There was before the Civil War, there was an idea that you could pay the slave owners to emancipate their slaves and end slavery that way.
and I think some of the northern states did do that. I think.
Yeah, yeah,
But at this point, you had your chance. Too late for you now.
yeah. There were ways that we could have ended this without a rebellion. You chose rebellion, ergo, you're paying for it. Literally. The states still owe all of the debt that they incurred as rebellion, in it as rebel territories. Individuals owe all of the debt that they incurred as rebels. The United States doesn't have to pay for it.
Now, here it says, but I'm assuming the states themselves, they wanted it, they could pay. The states could pay the people if they wanted to. The federal government is not going to.
Yeah, and there were people who got Confederate pensions, but they were not federal pensions. Confederate pensions got paid surprisingly late. Alabama granted them in 1867 for veterans who had lost arms or legs. 1886, they began granting pensions to widows. 1891, it was indigent veterans or their widows. So, yeah, the states themselves were issuing these pensions. Some of them beginning surprisingly late. Kentucky began granting pensions in 1912.
Well, technically, Kentucky was a Union state.
Sure. Likewise, Missouri, 1911.
Still a slave state, but they were quote, a loyal slave state.
Yeah, Oklahoma was in 1915. So these are very clearly states that are trying to make a point by issuing Confederate pensions. This is more Jim Crow stuff. The states that were actually Confederate, that's all the, wow. In 1915, Arkansas began granting pensions to the widows and mothers of Confederate veterans.
Mothers? Were they even still alive at this point?
I was going to say, you have to figure they weren't granting them to many mothers, starting in 1915. But sure.
I think maybe some soldiers still alive by that point still, but the parents.
Yeah, like the widows, okay, but the mothers is the surprising part. So yeah, the states would pay them. The federal government was not and did not. If you lived long enough, you got Social Security, but that's it.
So of all of these so far that we've seen, these 4 sections, I think mainly maybe it's the first and third section they want to overturn. Second and fourth, maybe, I don't know.
I mean, the second, I don't think they know about the second, mostly. And I don't think they know about the fourth either. And the fourth is one that I will say, yeah, that's primarily a Civil War thing. Though I do think that, if you have debt because you went and invaded the Capitol 4 years ago, sucks to be you.
So maybe this one too, maybe a little bit. The fourth one, second one, I doubt they will overturn it, but I won't put it past them,
Yeah.
back to the Three-Fifths Compromise, but I think mainly it's the first and third one they wanted to overturn.
Yeah. And if you ask them, they only know about a few of the bits from the first one. I don't think most of them know anything past birthright citizenship, maybe, and Constitution applies to states now, maybe. And a lot of them want states' rights to oppress people back.
So we talked about this a lot, and we talked about the fifth article.
Mm-hmm.
It's a chance of the current state houses and the current Senate that 2/3 that the 14th Amendment could be overturned.
Yeah,
there is a chance.
There is a chance. I don't think it will happen. I really don't think they've got the numbers to do it.
I appreciate that they'll have a super majority in Congress to do it, because you need the 2/3 of both houses to do this. But I'm not sure. That one I'm not sure about. If they do that, I'm not sure about the 3/4 of the state houses, though.
Yeah, they would not get it through the U.S. the various states. There's no way that 3/4 of the states would pass overturning the 14th Amendment, but I don't think they've got the numbers to do it in Congress either, because I think there are enough Republican senators who A, worry about their legacies, and B, see the real problems that would come from doing this.
Yeah, because like I said, because this is a 2/3 super majority, not just
yeah.
Because you need all of the Republicans plus a few of the Democrats too.
Yeah. They simply do not have the numbers, and you cannot do it by executive order. Executive order does not outweigh the Constitution. It says so in the Constitution.
I'm probably gonna try, though. I'm guessing.
Oh, I'm sure he's gonna try, but
the problem is, will they let him do it? With the current Congress and the current Supreme Court, they say, "Oh, you can't do that," or they're like, "Okay, don't care."
No, I think that is a bridge too far for almost the entirety of our Supreme Court. You'd hope that Clarence Thomas would see the problem with it, but I'm not counting on that.
But no, I don't know. You know, he claims he's doing it because of his president. The president that can do what he wants to do if he has the presidential power. So he has presidential power now. You know.
Yeah, Clarence Thomas is surprisingly ignorant about constitutional history. You would think a man whose entire marriage is based on things like the 14th Amendment would be really hesitant about overruling the 14th Amendment. But you would also think that a man whose entire marriage is based on the unspoken right to privacy would be wary about overruling the right to privacy, but here we are. But there's no way you could get Roberts to allow a president to overdo parts of the Constitution. He would not do that.
Is he the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice?
He's the Chief Justice. The thing is he will allow executive orders that skirt the boundaries, but he's not going to allow a presidential by executive order to amend the Constitution. There's no way he would let that happen. I don't think most of the justices would let that happen. There's two I'm hesitant about.
Yeah.
But there's a majority who would not stand for it.
Like I said, when we're recording this, it's January 7th. So when we upload this, we will come back to see the comment section to see if our predictions were correct, because this is probably uploaded way after Trump goes in office.
Yeah.
We'll see if we were. Hopefully, we were right. We'll see.
Yeah. We got one more slide here? 15th Amendment is next. Okay,
All right,
so that is.
Hopefully, you can tell us in the comment section if we were right or not about this.
Yeah.
We'll see you for the final of the Civil War Amendment.